This between us.
The number one podcast in the world.
This is
the JBU.Show featuring Austin,
from the Miller Talk Podcast,
Allan,
the American Sincerest,
and now your host,
Cam Allen.
All right, how's it going, everybody? My name is Chris, and this is Just Between Us. There we go. That was a terrible noise. And I suppose you'd probably like to see us, too. There we go. I got to apologize real quick that I told you Austin was going to be taking a break for a little bit. Allan hasn't necessarily been taking a break, but I've been having to do the show later in the evening. And, of course, he's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. So later in the evening for me is like just before he gets up in the morning. But that will be corrected here pretty shortly. Looks like X is finally working correctly again, so hopefully that's happening. We got a couple interesting stories from today. Nothing really crazy going on in the news. We're going to talk about a few things. We might talk about guns a little bit later, just because there's not a whole lot else to talk about. And of course, I like guns, so might as well. But first tonight, a man armed with a loaded shotgun was arrested outside the Capitol today in what is an incredibly bizarre story. Let's go ahead and go to that right now. And, I suppose it would help if the browser was connected. There we go.
Out of Washington, police say a man with a loaded shotgun and wearing a tactical vest rushed the Capitol building. Ryan Nobles joins us now. Ryan, police quickly confronted him?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. Capitol Police say that 18-year-old Carter Camacho rushed the west front of the Capitol building with a loaded shotgun, but was quickly apprehended as soon as he was confronted by police. He was wearing a tactical vest, and when police searched his car, they found more ammunition, a Kevlar helmet, and a gas mask. No shots were fired, and Capitol Police were prepared. They had just conducted a live shooter threat exercise there. No one was hurt, and now investigators are working to determine a motive. Congress is not in session this week, so no members were in danger, but the campus was still bustling with staffers. Tom?
All right, Ryan, we thank you for that.
And that's pretty much all we have on it. And this is not the first time a weird thing has happened in front of the Capitol, and we've had pretty much no explanation whatsoever. What I find strange about this situation is the way that it has been reported is that he was wearing he was wearing armor. He had plate carrier, or at least a Kevlar vest, not necessarily a plate carrier. A loaded shotgun, as you heard, ballistic helmet, and gas mask. He was clearly on a mission, but then the moment he was confronted by police officers, gave up peacefully, which I'm glad he did. You know, I'm glad nobody was hurt. But that's very strange. Like, incredibly strange. I honestly don't know. I don't know what to make of this. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. You can leave a comment under the show below, and I will read it on air if you would like. If you don't, make sure you mention that. Otherwise, you can leave a comment under the show on x.com/JBU_show. Yesterday, I didn't report the shooting that had taken place in Rhode Island. I'm not going to go through a lot of details on it because this particular situation was a family situation. It was, I hate even using the term, but what they call a family annihilator, where he shot his wife and kids and then himself in public. And, you know, I want to say thankfully, but at the same time, it's going to be incredibly tragic no matter what. One of the children did survive, but I just don't want to give any credibility to the story at all or mention it, which is why I didn't. I don't, if you haven't heard the story, you can find it reported on elsewhere. And I would just say go to that. It's just not something that I want to cover. We try not to say shooters' names on this show when mass shootings happen because we don't want to give absolutely any popularity or fame or anything to the people that commit them. I wish the mainstream media would still do the same, but it is what it is. Nonetheless, I did want to touch on it, and that's really about all I'm going to say about that. But it's just a weird situation altogether. I'm not really sure what the deal is there with that. Of course, we're going to talk about teachers here in a little bit. I've got a few different stories about teachers. And we need to do something about schools. We very badly, I suppose I probably shouldn't try and eat that. Well, there's not a video playing. We need to do something about schools because there is a significant problem. And we all kind of recognize right now that is, there's no other way to put it. There is a significant liberal woman problem. And what is the overwhelming majority of teachers? There's just no way around it. And something has to be done about it. Aside from everything else, I've been saying this for a long time anyway, because 3/4 of kids are graduating school unable to read, do basic math. They wouldn't technically be graduating, except they're just shoving them through. So graduation rates still seem somewhat high. But these kids can't read, they can't write, they can't do math, they have no idea what science is, they have no idea. They have basically zero historical education because the historical education that they have received is all bullshit. Anyway, a symptom of that, a symptom of that, really, 88%, this comes from the Post-Millennial, of college students pretend to hold progressive views in order to be socially, academically accepted, according to a new study. The majority of students, 82%, said that they had submitted assignments misrepresenting their actual views in order to align with an expected ideology. We dig in a little deeper here. A new study has found that a large majority of students on college campuses pretend to hold views more left-leaning than their own in an attempt to succeed socially or academically. And that is the whole point of these systems, right? It's not about being right. It's about towing the party line. And as long as you toe the party line, you'll get passed through. So these kids aren't learning anything in college either. They're just learning that as long as I follow the party line, it's all good. Doesn't matter if I believe it. Just matters that I keep what I believe buried deep down. Just so we're clear, I will never do that, and I hope you won't either. It's sad that that's a radical statement these days, but apparently it is. Anyway, researchers with Psychform conducted confidential interviews with 1,452 undergraduate students between 23 and 25 at Northwestern University and the University of Michigan. When asked, quote, "Have you ever pretended to hold more progressive views than you believe to be accepted socially or academically?" 88% of the students said yes. Shout out to that 12%. The study also found that 72% of students feel, quote, "reasoned disagreement with progressive views is not treated with respect." I want to be clear, too. If you are pretending to be something that you are not in order to get along easier, you're no better. You're not. That's how we got here in the first place. Yes, you have to sacrifice something to stand for something. It just is what it is. I've been fired before. I've been spit on, yelled at, threatened with arrest. Not by a cop, mind you, but And that's nothing compared to some people. You have to be willing to sacrifice something if you are going to stand for something. And you have to know where that line is, too. That's really important. Because I saw a lot of people that claim they stood for something just get mowed over during COVID. And I know I say that I mentioned this a lot, but it obviously, it upset me quite a bit. The people that I looked up to just put on the mask, just got the shot. Even though I know that they disagreed with it. Anyway, the study looked at rates at which students self-censored to avoid ideological conflict, with 78% saying they self-censored on topic of gender identity, and 72% for political beliefs, 68% on family values. Why would you have to self-censor on family values? Well, communists, progressives, they hate families. The majority of students, 82%, said that they submitted assignments misrepresenting their actual views in order to align with the expected ideology. When submitting work that challenged expected views, 80% said they did not receive positive feedback on their work. The study also asked students whether they agreed or disagreed with the statement, gender identity should override biological sex in athletics, healthcare, or legal documents. 77% disagreed. And of those who disagreed, 91% of them said they would not say so publicly. The people that do this are a tiny minority. The people that actually hold these views, and they don't actually hold these views. They hold these views to hold over you. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid. You think they don't use the same slurs in private that you do? The difference is you get in trouble for it, they don't. But only so long as you care, by the way. When looking at reputational threats, 81% agreed that silence is safest when unsure how views will be received. 77% agreed that peers assume morality based on ideological alignment, and 74% agreed expressing moderate views can harm reputation. Among friends, 73% of college students surveyed said they avoid sharing values with their close friends, while just 8% were fully open with their friendships. Nearly half of the respondents said they conceal beliefs in an intimate relationship. Kevin Waldman and Forrest Rahm, clinical psychology researchers with Psychform, wrote in an op-ed for The Hill, quote, "Universities often justify these dynamics in the name of inclusion, but inclusion that demands dishonesty is not ensuring psychological safety. It is sanctioning self-abandonment. In attempting to engineer moral unity, higher education has mistaken consensus for growth and compliance with care." That's a much nicer way of putting it than I would have. They later added, quote, "If higher education is to fulfill its promise as a site of intellectual and moral development, it must relearn the difference between support and supervision. It must recenter truth, not consensus, as its animating value. And it must give back to students what it has taken from them, the right to believe and the space to become." Again, it's a lot nicer than I would have put it, but they are, of course, correct. I told you last night, and I'll say it again, we're in a nice period of like being able to take a breather, right? Democrats are scrambling, and by that I mean progressives are scrambling right now, trying to regain control. They still have control of most things, though. They still control the media. They still control all the unelected positions in government, all of the staff positions. They still control the majority of the Congress, evident by the Republicans that continually vote against things that their party wants. They still control Hollywood. I think I already said the media. And most of the social media and Silicon Valley, AI, of course, with the exception of one. But we're in a nice period of reprieve because they've screwed up badly. But they will get their act together at some point. Historically, if we look at progressives, because as I've told you many times, this has been going on since 1900, roughly. And as that lady from I forget the name of the place, but the video that we watched last night of that sweet old lady who was incredibly on top of what was going on, and it was nice and reassuring that her timeline immediately lined up with mine. Of course, I already got rid of the video, but it was like Prometheon or something like that. Prometheon American or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I apologize. Oh, here it is. Yeah, Promethean Action. That's what it was. But that her timeline lined up almost exactly with mine. She pointed to President McKinley, who died in 1901, as basically the last of the true American presidents of the founding era or generation. And there's cycles. So the first progressive era was 1900 and 1920. In 1920, with the election of Harding, Americans flat out rejected progressivism. They allowed them to make these radical changes like income tax, like the Fed, and many others, and it failed miserably, ultimately leading, in my opinion, it's what caused the Great Depression. They'll tell you it was the stock market crashing. That, of course, triggered the Depression, but that's not what caused it. What caused it was the Fed and the government magically deciding they could print debt all of a sudden. But anyway, Americans flat out rejected progressivism. So progressives went through a lull period, and they changed their clothes, and they changed their appearance and the way that they sold things and all of that, and they came back around about 20 years later with FDR. FDR made a bunch of radical changes. Americans flat out rejected it, and it was clear to Americans what we remember today, or what we are told to remember today, rather, is that FDR was one of the greatest presidents in American history. He saved us from the Great Depression. No, he didn't. He extended the Great Depression 12 years. Extended it. Longer than it should have been. He would have been remembered as an abject failure if it wasn't for World War II. But because of World War II and how that ended up shaking out, America was the only industrialized nation left standing, which allowed us a big windfall. And if it wasn't for that, we would remember FDR as a massive failure, as the people at the time did. They only allowed him to stay in office that second time, and then of course he just stayed the third time, because the war was going on, and people at the time believed that it was important to keep a consistent form of government during the war. Not because they believed him to be particularly competent. Nonetheless, after that period, we went through another lull. Of course, this is during the Cold War and the fighting of communism. A lot of people started seeing the parallels between progressivism and communism, which led to a little bit of an overreaction, of course, with McCarthyism and all of that. And progressivism went back into a hibernation period, and it came back around in the 1960s and 1970s. Hippies were widely hated by the average American. They were not popular. We remember the 60s and 70s as the period of the hippies. These were the same radical agitators that they are today. They bombed places, they shot places up, and they staged events like the shooting at Kent State, where the National Guard was called in, and they started agitating the National Guard until somebody ended up getting shot. And most Americans were not upset about it because they understood that a game was being played. But of course, history, when controlled by who? The winners, you're able to paint a different picture. Anyway, they come back, and then, of course, America rejects progressivism yet again in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan and with Nixon as well. Now, Nixon made some mistakes, and I don't mean, a lot of people think of Nixon as Watergate, right? What they have no idea is that Nixon was entirely set up for Watergate, and the only thing that he was impeached for was because he knew about it. He was told about it after the fact. He didn't know that it was happening. These people that worked for the CIA, by the way, not for him, just went off and did this thing. Some random CIA guys went off and broke into the DNC to frame him, essentially. Nobody says that out loud, but that is clearly what happened. They broke in to the DNC to frame him. His chief of staff told him about it after the fact to say, and I quote, but I don't remember the exact quote, I'm paraphrasing, but who the hell authorized them to do that? That's what he said. That's what the big critical tape was. And that was it. He resigned rather than be impeached because, men did that sort of thing at those times. That was the big awful thing he did. He had learned about it and didn't tell the American people right away. That was it. He had no part in it. He didn't order it to happen, and he wasn't in favor of it, as we know by the tapes, because we know what his genuine reaction was when he found out. Regardless, Nixon and Reagan were the response for the 60s and 70s progressives. They go back into a quiet period. Bill Clinton, while we recognize that he is a progressive and was not a, this is where after Reagan is where they get a sufficient foothold in both parties. The Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bidens, right? These big names, the Cheneys, the Gores, these big names that we all recognize. They've now got a sufficient foothold in both parties, and their plan at this point is now to just play moderate going forward on both sides. And that way, no matter which side wins, they're still in power. Now we're in a period of them having to retreat again a little bit. They're trying not to have to do that, though, because they've become accustomed to having absolute power for an extended period of time now. So I don't know where this all goes, but it's important to understand this is not the first time that progressives have had to take a step back from their big ambitions. And I say that to say, don't think we've gained anything yet. Don't think that we're anywhere near out of the woods yet. It is more important today than yesterday that you are informed on history and on today, that you are watching out for the snakes, like Dan Crenshaw, and that there's no taking the foot off the gas. If we lose the midterms this election, all of this was for nothing. If we win the midterms this election and keep the same useless people in office that are there right now, all of this was for nothing. If conservatives don't start doing the living up to, I was trying to think of the right way to put it, living up to the responsibilities that we've actually always had and just haven't done for a long time, then we've accomplished nothing and we will be right back to square one within 10 years, if not less. And I don't want to go through the whole list again. I do it all the time. I'll do it again at some point. But obviously, it comes down to, first of all, serving, if that is something you can do, actual civil service, right? Run for your local city council, run for your school board, those things. But show up to these places, hold them accountable, starting at local government and working your way up. Call your congressman every single time there's a vote on something and make sure they know that their constituents are watching, that they are breathing down their neck to make sure they make the right choice. These people are cowards, and they are a lot more responsive than we give them credit for. The problem is nobody bothers to take the time. And I understand that's not always possible. We have jobs, we have families, all of that, right? But it is more possible now than ever. 9 times out of 10, all you need is a phone call. Can you imagine? We wouldn't have to question at all how anybody in Congress was going to vote on the SAVE Act if every Republican member of Congress received 5,000 phone calls. 5,000. There were 77 million people that voted for Donald Trump. If 5,000 called them every single day to make sure that they knew that we were watching, it's that simple. It really is. I said this yesterday. This is why me and my co-host got into it, because I don't think that protests are all that effective. I don't really think that rallies are all that effective. I don't have a problem with rallies in particular, but the problem with rallies is something that we should have understood before January 6th, but clearly didn't. It's easy, if you're not paying attention, for that to get manipulated, as it was. We all see what happened. We have to take on more personal responsibility. But this all doesn't just come down to government either. This also comes down to civil. Because if we want a smaller government that is less involved in our lives, then we have to be more involved. We have to hold higher standards. We have to have the ability to do the things that we currently rely on government for. This is why I started the American Militia Project. You can check it out at x.com/militia_project. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to put the work into it lately that I have wanted to. But believe me, I haven't forgot about it. If we want a more responsive government, if we want our elected leaders held to some sort of account, if we want our unelected bureaucrats held to some sort of account, if we want our law enforcement, ATF, FBI, CIA, and many others. And if you're on the left, ICE, right? I don't think ICE has done anything wrong, but if you're on the left, you think they have. And that's fine. They're a federal agency too. They need to be held accountable as well. Agreed. I don't think there's anything to hold them accountable for right now. But we can't do that unless we have the ability to do that. And that is where the civil militia comes in. Our founding fathers were not calling for a National Guard. The National Guard is a standing military they warned us against. It has a little bit of the fail-safe built in just to make it look more legitimate than it actually is. But they intended the militia to be the same as the sheriff rounding up a posse, essentially, where you have some people in charge that probably do that all the time. They, you know, whatever position they hold in the militia, generals or whatever, it wouldn't be generals, right? But just for sake of argument at the moment, they would probably do those jobs all the time. But the average member of the militia only shows up if needed. And for training, obviously. They're not funded through the government. They're self-funded. They're not beholden to the government. They can be called on by the governor and by the president, but they're not beholden to them. They're beholden only to the people, which is themselves. I'm not talking about a militia that is, you know, some guys out running around in the woods pretending. I'm talking about an actual organized militia, not that is acting outside of the law, that is upholding the law. Well armed and well trained, just like the Second Amendment says. Which, if you're unaware, that's what well-regulated means. Well-armed and well-trained. You can look at a dictionary from 1776 if you're unclear about it. Anyway, we've gone through a lot of those quotes and stuff before, but that's part of why I want to talk about guns here in a little bit. Because what does that mean? It's more than just owning a gun, right? If you want to be live up to your responsibility that the founding fathers laid out as an American, it's a lot more than just owning a gun. So we might talk about exactly what the modern American that wants to live up to those expectations, what they should probably have and what they should probably do. If you're interested in the American Militia Project, like I said, you can go to x.com/militia_project and follow the page and send me a message if you want to get involved. And I've had a lot of people message me so far, and as soon as we get enough people with enough skills that are able to get things moving a little bit faster, then I will dedicate my time back to that. But it's one of those things, I can't do it all on my own. I've got so many other things going on that it's had to sit on the back burner until kind of enough people are involved. But anyway, let's talk about teachers, and then we'll go from there. So I've got a couple different stories here. Give me just a second here. I'm pulling them up. Oh, I wanted to see. So I'm going to read this. I don't know if this story is what I think it is. We're going to find out together here, just because I caught this headline and I didn't have a chance to read it before the show. But I thought it was interesting. This is in Germany, so it's not all that important to us, but an actor was attacked by the audience while delivering a far-right speech in character at a German theater. And that's what I wanted to know. Was he delivering a far-right speech, or was he playing his role as a character in the play? Because it goes to just how absolutely ignorant and how rabid leftists are. Antifa in Europe is no different than Antifa in America. It's the same group, the same people. An actor was pelted with fruit, shouted down, and attacked by members of the audience as he delivered a monologue in character as a far-right activist. Ole Lagerpush was left traumatized after the crowd tried to drag him off stage while he produced his final lines during the German premiere of Katerina and the Beauty of Killing Fascists in Bochum, North Rhine-Westphalia, on Saturday. In chaotic scenes, the audience began whistling and heckling the actor, pressuring him to stop his performance. An orange was hurled at him before two people from the crowd got up on stage and tried to drag him away. Security has been ramped up at further performances of the prize-winning play, which tells the story of a family who kidnap a fascist each year in order to execute him during a family feast. As the provocative play progresses, there is an argument between the family who discusses what means are justified to defend democracy. Thank God we don't have a democracy. In the final act, the far-right kidnap victim, played by Lagerpush, delivers a 15-minute monologue. Jesus, I'd probably heckle too. I guess that's kind of ironic since I essentially deliver a 3-hour monologue, but he persevered despite intimidation from the audience and completed his speech, but has been left traumatized according to the play's director. Here, let me switch this over so you guys, I'll show you a picture of him here performing. There you go. So that's the actor right there. I'm not sure what the deal is with the ape. I don't know if that's somebody in a suit. It looks like it was AI, like added in AI to the photo. I'm very confused. Let's see. An orange was hurled at the actor before two people from the crowd got up on stage and attempted to drag him away. This is apparently the theater where it happened. Matija Kolensnik said she was incredibly proud of the actor and hit out the stupidity of the attack. For me, it was quite a shock. We did expect people talking back, even shouting back, because of course the last monologue is provocation. But I was astonished by the stupidity, really. I never, ever thought, nobody did, that somebody from the audience would jump on stage and try to hit the actor. I would expect this from people we are voting against, but not from the people who should be on our side. If that person does not come to the realization that that's because you are the fascists, the brown shirts are only supposed to beat up the people that don't salute Hitler. A spokesperson for the Bachmann Playhouse, one of the country's most renowned venues, said at first people began whistling and heckling, insulting Lagerpush and urging him to stop. An orange was thrown at the actor, narrowly missing him. Furthermore, two spectators mounted the stage, apparently with the intention of dragging the actor off the stage, which was prevented. They said branding the assault completely unacceptable. In his review for the German culture website TWTCH, Martin Crumbles wrote, parts of the Bachmann audience, which one would have thought to be among the most theater savvy in the country, are apparently too stupid, to put it bluntly, to distinguish between fiction and reality. I got news for you. It's not just the Bachmann audience. While theater critic Christoph Orem said it was a good play for taking the audience out of their comfort zone, adding, quote, "It's truly astonishing that a play can still elicit such reactions in 2026. One spectator said, see, they wouldn't get so angry if they weren't worried that the speech was convincing. And that's the important thing to note. If they just thought it was stupid and racist and homophobic, because of course it isn't, it never is, right? It's always the insult, but it's never true. If they weren't worried that people might listen because it actually makes some sense, they wouldn't get so angry. One spectator said that it was scary. Supposedly, anti-fascist theatergoers stormed the stage and attacked the actors. This is basically a fascist attitude towards art and theater, and in my opinion, should never happen. Alright, there's nothing else here. Yep, I'm glad somebody said it. I would expect this from the people we are voting against, not from the people that should be on our side. We seriously need to rethink our relationship with Western Europe. Leftists invented whiteness as shorthand for everything they hate about Western civilization, including Christianity. And the insane thing is that the majority of the practitioners likely aren't even white, and the religion originates in the Levant. No idea what that means. I'm gonna leave it alone. Anyway. Alright. Now to teachers. Let's see. Oh, we have Mondami too. Actually, let's do Mondami real quick. Get this story out of the way. Shocking. Mondami going back on a campaign promise already. Who would have thought? Oh, I kind of thought this was a video of something. Sorry, I needed a brief second to blow my nose. Alright, well, that's an awful sound. Sorry about that, guys. I genuinely thought that was a brief of the story. I shouldn't have left that candy there because then I ended up eating it anyway, even though I knew I shouldn't. Okay. Mayor Zorhan Mondami is bringing back homeless encampment sweeps, reversing course on another campaign promise, following backlash for not getting people off the streets during the deadly cold snap. The Post has learned his honor is expected to restart the practice used by each of his predecessors and ramped up during the Adams administration as soon as Wednesday. The city's Department of Homeless Services, which has been left in the lurch with zero guidance since Mondami's order came down to halt the sweeps last month, will again take the lead on issuing notices to people living on the streets. The homeless outreach workers will then return repeatedly over the next week to try and get the homeless connected with services before tearing down their makeshift living arrangements. The practice will mimic the process under former Mayor Eric Adams, with cops and sanitation workers, still on hand for the sweeps, according to insiders. The city has received more than 3,300 complaints about encampments around the 5 boroughs this year so far, according to 311 data. Mondami's about face comes amid the fallout over 19 deaths of people outside during the brutally cold stretch of weather, the first crisis of his fledgling administration. City Council Speaker Julie Menin skewered the administration's response during a council hearing last week, declaring, quote, "These New Yorkers should be alive today." You know, they would be if you just stopped screwing around and made them get off the street. This is absolutely ridiculous that we do this. And no surprise that Mondami's having to go back because he had no plan, right? It's always, it's heartless and mean, just like the detention centers. And then you ask the leftists, do you know why they're in a detention center and not deported back to their home country? It's because they chose to remain in detention in order to fight their deportation. If they just accepted the deportation, just signed the paper and said, okay, they wouldn't have to sit in detention for 1 day. I mean, probably 1 day, but however long it takes to get on a plane and go home. It's that simple. The only reason it takes so much time is because these leftist activist judges are convincing these people that they have a case if they try and stay. Newsflash, you don't. And so now we got to sit and pay billions of dollars to litigate this stuff to people that broke into the country illegally. But I digress. I'm obviously way off topic here. Anyway, again, there's not much more to say about this other than just pointing out the hypocrisy, the fact that there was no plan other than, I don't like this, so we're just not going to do it. And then guess what? People die. There's no... It's important that we understand, and this is what I was complaining about with people on the right yesterday, there are no pretty solutions to these things. There are no solutions with dealing with the homeless crisis, with dealing with the mental illness crisis, with dealing with the illegal immigration crisis, and with dealing with crime. There are no solutions that are pretty. They all are going to be messy, nasty ordeals. And there's nothing we can do about that other than our best. Which is why any conservative that says, well, I wanted the deportations, but not like this, you can go to hell. Unless you think you can do a better job, then I suggest you shut the hell up. Anyway. Back to teachers. Parents opting kids out of school laptops, returning them to pen and paper. Yes, this one isn't specifically about teachers, but it is important. Parents are forming a loose network, teaching one another how to get their children off school-issued Chromebooks and iPads. This is one of the most important things you can do. I've said before, my kid will not have his own phone until he's old enough to buy it himself and probably out of my house. That goes for social media and everything else too. If he needs a laptop for school, we'll get him a laptop. It will have no internet connection, and it will sit in the living room when it needs to be used. Period. There's no reason. And I would much rather him hate me over it than kill himself one night because of some dumb shit happening on Facebook. It's that simple. And parents need to man the fuck up and stop selling their kids out because they're lazy or afraid to be hated by their kids. If your kid doesn't tell you they hate you by the time they're 13, you're fucking up as a parent. And who gives a shit what some angry feminist thinks about it? Julie Fruman broke the news to her 11-year-old son in the minivan on the way home from school. His laptop was being taken away. His face lit up. "Really?" he asked, beaming with excitement. It wasn't a punishment. It was a victory Fruman had fought hard for. Her third-grade daughter had already opted out of using school-assigned laptops in favor of pen and paper, and her son wanted to follow suit. The middle schooler had been begging to opt out, citing headaches from the Chromebook screen and a dislike of AI chatbot recently integrated into it. "I'm just so happy that they're getting an analog education for now. Parents across the country are taking steps to stop their children from using school-issued Chromebooks and iPads, citing concerns about distractions and access to inappropriate content that they fear hampers their kids' educations." And as I've told you guys before, it is so much worse than that. Those are just the tip of the iceberg. You have the fact that they are trying to make your kid addicted to these things so that they come home and get back on their phone and their computer and their tablet. And the fact that they are building a database, a data set on your child starting in kindergarten. They started with you at 16, 17, 18 when you started getting online, when we started getting all these different methods of extracting data out of people. They're starting with your child in kindergarten. AI will know your child better than they know themselves and be able to not only trick them into doing things, but steer them into doing whatever it wants them to, or whoever controls the AI wants them to. I know that sounds like some crazy fiction. It's not. It's really not that complex, and it is possible today. They do it all the time. That's what advertising is. And if you don't believe there are nefarious people out there that want to do these things, allow me to play this video for you again. Just a second.
Examples. So one is that people eat too much meat, right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption of meat, then
WEF.
they would, it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, you know, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is
Those
just
assholes.
too juicy, I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, you know, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance. And some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the long star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big
He's
world
excited
problems
about it.
through human engineering. Another
This really is how elites think. They really believe that if they just had the control, individually, they all believe this, that if they just had the control over your life, they could run your life better than you can. Yeah. Anyway, the parents have started to organize through email and in-group chats with hundreds of members, swapping tips and creating online resources for other families to use when approaching their own district about alternatives to school-issued devices. In interviews with a dozen parents, each said that they were first in their district to attempt to opt out, often confounding school officials who weren't sure whether opting out was legally allowed. By the way, it is. Tell them you opt out and stand your ground. But that they felt it was crucial to prove a point. Emily Cherkin, a former teacher who recently testified before Congress about screen time in education, created a toolkit based on material she had prepared to stop her daughter from using school-issued devices in her Seattle middle school 2 years ago. It included research on the efficacy of digital tools, email templates, and suggested questions to ask administrators. Cherkin said she knows of 4 other families in her district who opted their children out since she did, and the toolkit has been downloaded over 3,000 times. Make that 3,001. For me, opting out is not the end goal. It's the means to the end, she said. And the way I see it, you force a conversation. It gives permission to other parents to even just start asking questions. These families reflect a growing backlash to education technology, driven by concerns about excessive screen time and the harm that it causes to youth. What started as anger directed at social media companies has translated to pressure on schools. The request present a new challenge for administrators and educators who followed national trends toward more digital learning and provided a laptop for every child. Yeah, they didn't. What happened was Google and Microsoft came in and said, here, we'll give you these, and the teachers went, you mean I don't have to do all this stuff anymore? I can just shove the screen in front of them? Great. there was incentives involved too. Am I on screen? No, I'm not. Okay. I am going to... Okay, so I just downloaded this myself. I will take a look at it and share anything I find of value with you guys. But I'm going to share this link as well. If any parents are listening and are curious, I will put it in the comments right now on all platforms that we are streaming to. Oh, yeah, that's right. I got to do it to X manually. Hang on 1 second, guys. Give me just a second to do this. All right. It is on the pin post on the JBU.Show page on X, as well as the comments on Rumble and everywhere else. All right. Next story. Educators need to stop radicalizing kids. That's the message we must send to educators in California's socialist cities, such as Los Angeles and San Francisco. Oh, just teach is the message, sorry. Instead, teachers' unions and other educational leaders have taken a dangerous path by indoctrinating students, some only in elementary or middle school, into violent far-left politics. This isn't just about kids speaking their minds shaped by adults. It's about radicalizing kids and using them as political weapons. The result is a generation of kids who, like many of their teachers, put ideology above learning, politicize daily life, and disrespect law enforcement authority. And this is a big problem. Kids are being used as pawns and weaponized against federal agents, as we saw in downtown LA on Friday. Yeah, we've seen it many times since then. If you're on X at all, you've seen these videos going around the last few days of kids all over the country, especially in Washington, Oregon, and California, beating people up, fighting with cops, and much more. We'll go to an example after this story. Students are protesting and even rioting during school hours instead of completing lessons. Even worse, there are often parents watching it happen. And kids starting at a young age are moving from grade to grade with a skewed set of values and priorities, including brazen disrespect for public safety officials. The left-wing activism in schools today is pervasive and astounding. It needs to end. Too often, though, educators emphasize activism, gender identity, and anti-ICE rancor. They hold anti-capitalism rallies, promote left-wing slogans such as Free Palestine, and chant things like no one is illegal on stolen land. These are the people that are supposed to be teaching U.S. history to your child. This land isn't stolen. In fact, 90% of it was bought and traded for. And if you weren't aware, or if you'd never thought about this before, how did Native Americans get here? They colonized. They came over the ice bridge from Russia and colonized. They moved around, found a place they liked, and settled there. It's exactly the same thing the colonists did. Exactly the same. Oh, and the Native Americans killed anybody in their way. The colonists didn't do that. They didn't just kill anybody in their way. They first tried to live with them. They tried to trade with them. They tried to barter with them. Some did. They lived peacefully amongst them. They even helped fight the Native American tribes that the good and nice and friendly Native American tribes were afraid of on their behalf. And then the Native Americans decided they wanted a lot of what we built, like Manhattan. We bought the island of Manhattan. We built an entire city out of it. The Native Americans that sold it to us came back and said, we like what you've done with the place. We want it back. And they tried to kill us for it. So we killed them instead. We didn't go out and find them and hunt them down. They came back and challenged us. And I'm not saying that's exactly the case in every place. I'm not saying that there was never a group of colonists that didn't do something they shouldn't have. But there was plenty of natives that did terrible things too. It's just the way things were. And I'll be damned if we have anything to apologize for it. Parents, meanwhile, often either reinforce these outrageous lessons or simply fail to teach their children more principled views, which is on you, by the way. Given the hyper-political mindset that has permeated school systems and teaching materials, it is any wonder that students in districts such as LA and San Francisco repeatedly post abysmal math and English scores. Meanwhile, unions which donate to the campaigns of school board members support this activism and expect elected officials to follow their wishes of their benefactors. Remember a few years back when United Teachers Los Angeles demanded defunding police, funding the homeless, and taxing the wealthy as conditions for reopening schools after COVID closures? Schools have grown thoroughly politicized, and now we're seeing anti-Trump panic from socialist school districts. They want to keep far-left ideology in the schools, of course, but the Trump administration has been pushing back, whittling away and slowly removing destructive rot such as anti-Semitism, DEI, and critical race theory. The unions are fighting back. That's part of what we're seeing with the kids lashing out against Trump and ICE. Disgracefully, some educators are exploiting kids for raucous activism, whatever, on purpose. After all, the teachers themselves can't swing polls at agents. Instead of making children feel safe at school, some teachers and activists are warning them that ICE could take them away, traumatizing kids with the goals of radicalizing them. And they know the students, if they break the law, won't be charged as adults. All of this goes far beyond just shouting a slogan, wearing a t-shirt, piercing a nose, or wearing blue hair. It is creating a whole class of violent, unaccountable adolescents. As a society, we should ask, if this, activism, and a violent reaction to politics is what they're teaching and prioritizing in class, then how are California students, and this is not just in California, by the way, going to be able to perform even the simplest jobs out of high school? Just teach. Told you I was going to show you an example. Oh, well, here, let's put this up on screen real quick. Map. This happens to coincide. I forgot I had this. Map of the least educated cities in the country. Notice something interesting? The overwhelming density here is right here. A little bit in Florida. A ton in California, Portland, and Seattle. And then you got a little bit here. This is Colorado, right here. A little bit here, a little bit here, a little here, here. Kind of these random places. You got Hawaii, Austin, right here. Michigan and Minnesota. And then the bulk concentration is here and here. It all circles around leftist cities. Almost completely. Almost completely centers around leftist cities. That's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. Not a factor of them having more people. This is per capita. When is enough enough? Let me find the example here. I didn't know I could get notifications from Grok. I hate to show this video. This one is from Los Angeles. Los Angeles, students who walked out of class in an anti-ICE protest surged the grounds outside the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown LA before federal agents attacked kids with tasers and wielded batons. You can see for yourself whether or not they attacked any kids. I see multiple kids assaulting officers. I've yet to see an officer assault a kid. Oh look, that kid's punching a cop. Where do you think they get the idea that this is okay? From their parents. You notice anything else about the majority of these kids? You certainly don't see any American flags. Your kids have to go to school with these kids. And just to be clear, it's not a race thing. It's a culture thing. I feel for these cops. Sorry, I'll mute this. But I want to leave this up on screen for a minute. This ends when parents are pissed off enough to go to the schools. All of them. Every single one of them. Teachers need to be scared to do anything except teach. Actual history, actual math, actual English, and actual reading. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, Alan liked my reply. I didn't realize he was online. Now I feel bad. I should have messaged him. Colorado, I believe it is trying to regulate gun barrels. God only knows why. This comes from Guns and Gadgets Second Amendment
What if
News.
I told you that this state, what they're trying to do right now, you could go to jail for
We're not going to
selling
watch this whole
a
thing, but
metal tube,
just to get
not a
the
gun, not a
basic
receiver,
info here.
not a frame, not even an FRT, but a barrel. And they're doing it in direct defiance of the Supreme Court's ruling in Bruin. And let me know what you think of our new America 250 collection at Blackout. This is one of our new shirts. We got 3 of them. Check them out. I just got mine and I love it. And hopefully you'll love them too. But what's going on in these Democrat states now with their TDS is kind of going crazy. This is exactly how rights get dismantled, guys. Piece by piece, part by part, while most people are not even paying attention. If you care about the Second Amendment, the Constitution, and stopping this kind of overreach before it spreads nationwide, hit subscribe right now. Because this channel is where we break it all down for you. Fact by fact, case by case, law by law, no spin, just straight stuff. So let's get into it. This is Senate Bill 26-4 43, introduced into Colorado's 75th General Assembly. And here's what it does in plain English.
So yeah,
according
Colorado.
to the bill text, a firearm barrel can only be sold or transferred in person by a federally licensed firearm dealer. That's an FFL. Private citizens cannot sell or transfer a barrel. A non-FFL cannot even possess a barrel with the intent to sell it. Violations are criminal misdemeanors up to 30 days in jail and fines. Buyers must be 18 plus and legally eligible to purchase firearms in order to buy a barrel. FFLs must record extensive personal data about the barrel sale. Records must be kept for 5 years. And the Colorado Bureau of Investigation must create a tracking form. Let me say that again. Colorado is attempting to regulate a barrel.
All right. So there's the basic information. You can watch the rest of the video. Regulating barrels. This is next level gun control at Guns and Gadgets on YouTube or Rumble, ideally. By the way, guys, please watch on, if you're watching on YouTube right now or you're watching on Twitch, please watch on Rumble and X, because we get struck so often. We get taken down so often from Twitch and YouTube. Thankfully, my channel in particular hasn't, but my co-host Austin, his channels on Twitch, on YouTube, and on TikTok have been struck and taken down. I've been struck on YouTube, although not taken down yet. It's just a nightmare. So please. But that said, this is an extension of what we've been talking about for a while, which is, first of all, it never goes away. They will never stop trying to gain ground on this. And the moment you think you're safe and not paying attention is when they're going to try and push something through like this. Further, they've largely failed at going after assault weapons. And trust me, it won't stop with assault weapons. That's just step 5 or whatever it is. SBRs, right, automatics, all that stuff was steps 1 through 4. We'll call it 5 now. I'm not sure exactly, but if we count SBRs, suppressors, automatics, and background checks, that would be 4. There we go. They're working on a database. We reported that a couple days ago. They've been working on it. They have a database. It just allegedly can't be searched at the moment, which is, of course, nonsense. But this is their new method, going after gun parts. They're trying 2 different things in many different ways in many different states, not just blue states either. And that is going after random gun parts and going after ammunition, claiming the Second Amendment doesn't protect gun parts and it doesn't protect ammunition. And because the weak-kneed Supreme Court refuses to just come out and say that the Second Amendment makes clear that the government cannot regulate the type of gun or any part of it, including the ammunition. It's not that hard. I'm hoping that they finally will. They have a case where they could do that coming up soon. They've been holding off on rulings. I'm not sure why, but because they haven't done that, that is the method that they are trying to go after them. And because Bruin is giving them a setback as well. It is incredibly important. If you believe in the Second Amendment, if you believe in this country, you don't even have to believe in the Second Amendment. If you believe in this country, even if you don't want to own a gun, you need to own not just a gun, an AR-15 or equivalent rifle. We're going to talk about what kind here in a minute. And not just a rifle. You need more than just the rifle itself. You should have one for every person in your family at minimum. And that doesn't mean they have to have access to them. Doesn't mean they ever have to use them. They should, obviously. You should teach your kids how to use firearms and how to use them safely. My son outshoots me. He's 10. He's been shooting since he was 5. Nonetheless, every kid is different, by the way. I want to be clear. I'm not challenging anybody to an age. Every kid is different as far as when they are competent enough to handle a firearm safely. So, you know your kid better than anybody else. To take that appropriately. But nonetheless, even if you have no intent on ever carrying a gun daily, or using it to hunt, or using it for any other purpose other than just if you were ever called upon to live up to your constitutional obligations, that's fine. You still need to have it. The good news is a gun never goes bad. As long as you store it correctly, it'll be fine for 100 years. But you need to have one, and you should have several. And part of the reason you should have several is not just for each person in your family, but having an extra one helps the people in places like California, New York, Massachusetts, Washington. I think Colorado still has their rights. Hawaii doesn't. Multiple states that you can't get these guns anymore. It is our only insurance against tyranny, against invasion, and against radicals. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I by no means believe we are anywhere near as close to a civil war as some people claim. I don't believe that we are anywhere near a point of, calling for vigilante justice or anything like that. I just believe that no matter how far away we are from something like that, it is your responsibility as an American to be prepared for it. And it is your legal right and obligation. So, I know I'm not going to be, saying anything new for gun guys out there. Anybody that is familiar with guns. But I do want to talk about for the people that aren't necessarily big on guns. As you've seen, these radicals are arming themselves. So if nothing else, that should be a good reason in and of itself for you to want to protect your family. And again, not just a gun. You need an assault rifle. And a lot of people get mad I use that term. That's what we all know it by. Call it whatever you want. Nonetheless, for the people that don't know or aren't particularly interested, and even for the people that are interested, this is just my 2 cents. What should you have? And what should you get if you don't have it? Obviously, you don't need military level equipment, right? You don't need the best of the best. You don't need, you need sufficient. And especially if you're a person that's not a gun person, it might be wise to even consider things that are more on the specialty or collectible side, because then you have a asset that is not just there in case of emergency, but is also something that might appreciate for you too. Generally speaking, I think guns probably hold their value better than like anything else. If you buy an AR-15 today, and it is a quality AR-15, not a ridiculously expensive one, just a quality rifle, and you put it in a box and you put it on the shelf, in 10 years, when it's not a collectible, right? It's only 10 years old. It'll be worth exactly as much as you paid for it, essentially. Maybe a little tiny bit less or something. But you will always, if you pay $1,500, you'll pretty much always be able to get $1,200 out of it. So there's almost no reason not to as well. It's not like you're just throwing the money away, even if it's something you have no interest in pursuing as a sport or a hobby. Even including training with it, right? Even including light use of it. Because it does, you cannot own a gun, even for an emergency purpose, and not get some training with it. I'm trying to decide which, there's a lot of directions to go here. That said, if you are more interested in guns, or you have a reason to need to conceal carry and protect yourself more, on a daily basis, or whatever, you should still have the rifle as well, but of course there are a plethora of handguns out there as well, and the same rules apply to them. A Gen 3 Glock 19 is worth $500 today. It was worth $500 when I first turned 21 and was old enough to buy one. So, if you're just the average person that isn't going to pursue it as a hobby or whatever, because obviously there are millions of videos out there, you could go through hours and hours on, various different things. There are many different brands out there, of course. There's probably 200 brands of ARs. Matter of fact, kind of curious. Let's see how many brands. How many companies? No. How many unique models of AR-15s are on the market in America today? Let's see. An estimated 500 models of AR-15 are on the market today. Pretty impressive. There's all kinds of different schools of thought on this. And there's a lot of people. I've always been a person that has looked for the best value in a gun. Meaning not the cheapest, but the cheapest gun that meets all of the minimum requirements, basically. The best overall value. That's always been where I am as a person. Now, as far as I've put a lot of thought into these sorts of things with the starting the militia project and stuff, in the research for that, one of the things I came across was the 1787, I might have the year wrong, but I think it's the 1787 Militia Act, where the federal government literally required every able-bodied male citizen ages 18 to 45 to own a rifled bore musket, a certain amount of ammo, a certain amount of gunpowder, because they were separate things back then, a certain amount of equipment for carrying the ammo and the gun and other necessary equipment, and I forget what else, a certain coat, and, all the basic equipment, right? All the same things I'm about to recommend the modern equivalent of to you. That is where this idea came from, that every able-bodied man in America, law-abiding man in America, should. And you should teach your sons to as well. So my recommendation, like I said, there's lots of schools of thought, and there are lots of rifles out there that, if it is just for fun, and I still wouldn't necessarily say for self-defense, because when it comes to self-defense, it's not that you need military level reliability, but you need damn near. The problem is there's reliable and there's not reliable. And if you're going to trust your life to it, it's got to be reliable, right? But then there's also kind of this step beyond that, which is, and I'll come back to that. There's kind of a step beyond that, which is the quality of rifle that the military buys, which is not just reliable, but I can throw it off a bridge, leave it under the river for 15 years, come back, pick it up, and fire it reliable. You don't need that, but you need just shy of that. You need to know that if you put it in the closet for 10 years, pick it up and pull the trigger, it's going to go off. And so for that reason, while there are a lot of AR-15s out there that are decent guns that I would certainly own myself, in fact, one of them that I wouldn't recommend, I have right here, which is Diamondback. Great AR-15 for budget gun. It's not going to be something I recommend. And there's going to be a lot of people that are angry about that, but the fact is, if you're only going to own one, and even if you're going to own multiple, you need to own at least one that is sufficient. And so what guns are those? There's more than one. There's still several options out there. You're going to be looking at about the $1,500 to $2,500 range. When it comes to AR-15s, you can get one these days for like $300-$400. As a matter of fact, let me pull up some examples so that we are looking at real things here. As far as ordering guns online, there's two major retailers that, I mean, there's lots of major retailers, okay? I can't go through all of them, obviously, but there are two major AR-15, especially retailers out there. One in particular that I like, which is Classic Firearms. They tend to have the most consistent deals. They tend to always have what I'm looking for in stock. Palmetto State is another big one. Palmetto State became a big in the AR-15 game because they make guns, and they make a lot of cheap budget guns. You can buy any brand from them, though. And I don't recommend you buy a PSA AR-15 if it is going to be... Remember, we're talking about a very specific type of rifle right now, or purpose for the rifle right now, which is you can use it for your self-defense gun, and it should also be your... What would we even call it? Country defense gun? I don't know. The other thing we're not going to be able to do right now is go through all the different variations and the difference between a pistol and a rifle, and, you know, we might cover a little bit of it if necessary here, but all the laws and the way they break out, so you still are going to have a lot more to learn than just this, but this will give you a good place to start on these things. And because we've already been going for a while, we'll probably just talk about the rifle tonight and maybe the rest of it tomorrow. But let me see here. Trying to get these websites pulled up real quick. And the other thing is, like I said, you need to own an AR-15. When I say an AR-15, it needs to be a direct impingement. A piston system is fine, but we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, why a direct impingement, which is, if you're not familiar with guns, that's just a standard AR-15. Direct gas impingement. 5.56, because there is still yet a better option. And if you want to own other things beyond that, that's great. But this is the bare minimum one. If you're only going to have one, it needs to be direct gas impingement. It needs to be 5.56. It should include a suppressor, which is separate, but that is kind of a necessity these days. And hopefully pretty soon will not include extra paperwork. But don't let the extra paperwork scare you. At least there's no charge for it now. As far as... so let's talk about the rifle itself. What kind of specs? So we talked about it needs to be direct impingement, needs to be 5.56. a regular rifle, and it requires the least amount of effort in most states, would be a 16-inch to avoid any SBR issues. A 16-inch is fine. However, because pistols are still perfectly legal to buy in 90% of places, I would recommend going with anywhere between 12.5 and 14.5 inches. It's just a far more useful setup. Now, that requires some specific knowledge. Either just getting an SBR, which is easy to do. It just takes a little extra paperwork, just like the suppressor. But if you're doing the suppressor anyway, you might as well just do it that way. It's the best way to go. But there's also the option of going the pistol route. And don't get confused by me saying pistol here. We're still talking about AR-15 rifles. But the difference is, here you can see, pull up a picture here. This is an AR pistol. What makes it a pistol is it has a barrel length under 16 inches and an overall length under, is it 26? Give me just a second here. I'm confirming because I don't want to give you bad information. Yeah, 26 inches. Okay. The barrel length is under 16 inches, and the overall length, which is with the buttstock closed from here to here, tip to tip, basically, less than 26 inches. The only limitations that you have when you do that are specific types of grips that you can put up front, which is stupid, but it is what it is. And then this back here. It looks like a stock. It's not a stock. It's a brace. It's very stupid, but it is the way it is. And with the wide availability rather of braces today, it is a simple option, and I'm all for it. Go for it. That said, well, I can't think of any reason not to, honestly. Again, if you don't want to have to worry about making sure you always have the right brace and all of that, which the one downside to the braces that I can think of is they gouge you on the price. A standard stock for an AR-15, just a regular old plain stock, which looks something like, give me a second here. Oh, come on. Just got it. There we go. Which looks something like this. 20 to 40 bucks all day. Without the buffer tube, but 20 to 40 bucks. And of course, you can go up from there, but it depends on how special you want it. A brace that is no more special than this stock right here, like an SBA 3, or I really like the new SBA 5s from SB Tactical. 200 bucks. So either you don't have to pay for the tax stamp anymore, so I guess you're not getting screwed on that end. You're just waiting for the extra paperwork. So either you do the extra paperwork or you pay extra for a decent brace. Choice is yours. There we go. We talked about it anyway. But 14.5 inch barrel length is the minimum barrel length to get complete burn out of 5.56. Why is their website not working? Is this not the right website? It is not the right website. So anyway, anything between 12.5 and 16 is fine. You don't want any longer, and you don't really want any shorter. When you start getting shorter, you can go down to as little as like 11.5 and still be practical for an AR, but you're severely limiting your range and your velocity when you start getting below 12.5 inches. Really, below 14.5, you start dropping pretty considerably. But there is a lot to be gained with the shorter barrel, especially if you're adding a suppressor to the end. So everything's a trade-off. is when it comes to barrel length, everything is a trade-off. Go 12.5 or 14.5. If you're going to get a suppressor, try to go with the 12.5. That will give you 500 meters of accuracy without much issue. If it's a quality gun, which we're going to talk about which brands those are here in a few seconds. But it's the best place to be. As far as anything else, there's not much else that needs to be specified. You want an M-lock rail on the front, which it's pretty hard not to get one of those even by accident these days. So there's not much to say as far as that goes. And then, yeah, that's really the only thing I can think of. I'm looking at a couple rifles here to see if there's anything I'm forgetting. This is not one that I'm recommending, but this is an example of a $400 AR. Yeah, this one's $419. This has an M-lock rail on the front, and you can tell that because it's got these horizontal slits, and that's for attaching accessories. It's got Picatinny on top, which is also what you want because that is what most sights, that's optics, that's how they attach. This is a 16-inch barrel, 5.56, direct gas impingement, and pretty straightforward. This rifle right here, minus the brand and all of that, is basically what every American should have at minimum. A direct impingement, 12.5 to 16-inch barrel, 5.56 AR-15 with a minimal optic, backup irons, and a flashlight. At minimum, every man, woman, and child in America should have one, in my opinion. And we talked about what those reasons are. Now, that said, don't spend $400. This gun, now I've never bought a Radical firearms, AR specifically. I've read a lot about them just because I've been curious, because they were as little as $300 at one point, like $320 I think they got down to. That's essentially what this is, because if you include the optic on there, but apparently they're fine. They're pretty reliable. They're not bad, but that is too low on the price scale to get significant or sufficient enough quality. So, what does that mean? What should you buy? Well, again, there are many, many options out there. The things to avoid are a PSA build, anything that is under $1,000. And again, I'm not saying that there are not perfectly good rifles under $1,000 or from PSA, anything like that. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. We're talking about if you're only going to have one rifle for this specific purpose, what should you have? The most common thing that I'm going to cite is probably going to be the DDR4, which is the Daniel Defense, or DDM4 rather. And looks like they're on the 7th generation currently. $1,800 on Palmetto. Let's see what they are from Classic. And there are some slight variations. Again, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be the DDM4 if you prefer a different grip and a different stock and all of that. If you want the pistol version again. But make sure it has the M-lock rail. Make sure it's at least a 12.5-inch barrel. No more than a 16. And this is kind of where you should be sighting. So again, there are many brands out there that are sufficient guns. They're good guns that would meet a mil-spec standard. One thing that we got to mention, mil-spec means nothing in the way that somebody that is not familiar with firearms thinks it would. It does actually mean something specific when you're talking about AR-15s, but it does not mean more reliable. It does not mean a certain quality of build. That Radical Firearms $400 AR-15 very well was probably mil-spec. That is, it means that the specific parts on the gun are put in the exact same places that they are on the original military specifications for the M4. That's all that means. Does not mean that the components are the same quality or anything else like that. There are certain names out there that have the reputation for being rock solid reliable. And they're workhorses, right? They're a Ford F-250 heavy duty, or what, I forget what they call it with Ford. Not the Power Stroke, but what's the you get the straight axles and stuff, right? It's or a Chevy HT, right? It's the work truck version, the heavier duty version that is going to start every time. That's what you're looking for. Daniel Defense makes wood. Another one, especially if you're okay with spending up a little bit, is the Knights Armament. They make some excellent ones. And actually, these are legitimate military rifles. The KS3, which is their latest. You can see here, this was just bought by British Special Forces. They bought a whole ton of these. These are their latest thing. The problem with Knights is, one, they're more expensive. You got to pay up for it. This gun right here is going to go in the $300 to $3,500 range. So it's going to be at least $1,000 more than the Daniel Defense. Also, Knights Armament, because they build for the military. Like I said, if you order a KS3 from Knights Armament, you are getting the exact same KS3 that the British Special Forces gets. But because Knights Armament sells to military and police first, their guns are hard to get a hold of. And so even if you want to spend up on it, they're harder to get your hands on. So it's not going to be an option for everybody, but it is another good option out there. Wilson Combat is another option, and I know some people are hearing that and thinking, why am I only mentioning expensive ass guns? Wilson Combat has very expensive handguns. I'll give you an example. If we look at some of their specialty 1911s, like the CQB Elite, full size, base price $4,600. $4,600. I don't know why anyone would ever spend $5,000 on a pistol. Sorry, guys. It's a finite amount of metal. That gun cannot cost them more than $1,500 to make. It physically cannot cost more than that. And it's not as if you're getting a one-off unique pistol. It's not like, 156-year-old gunsmith working in his back shop made a specific 1911 for you. It's still a commercially produced, granted to a higher spec, 1911. So I don't know why you'd spend $5,000. But anyway, rant aside, their rifles are not nearly as absurdly priced, which we'll see here in just a second. No, I want long guns. There we go. AR-15s. Let's see. The one that I recommend, 5.56 NATO. And by the way, you want it chambered in 5.56. 223 Wild is also acceptable. It is a multi-cal barrel, just like 5.56 is, just a little more accurate. But I think the SBR Tactical is the one that I prefer out of these. Yeah. And they have this in the pistol version as well if you don't want to go through the SBR. But let's see, $2,500. And I've actually seen them if you order them from like Classic or something. Let me take a look here. You can actually get them down to about the same price as the Daniel Defense. What did I say that was? SBR Tactical. Or some of the other ones. The Protector carbine, I think, was a decent one. They have it without a forward assist too, which is cool. This one base price is only $2,100, so you can probably get this one in that same $1,500 to $2,000 range. Guns are one of the only things, kind of like cars. The MSRP is actually the most expensive you'll probably ever see it for. The only exception to that are guns like Knight's Armament. Because they're rare, they're hard to get in the civilian world because they sell to civilians second, not first. That's really like the only exception. So people tend to not want to sell them. But when it comes to any run-of-the-mill gun, it's actually going to be cheaper generally at a gun store than it is the MSRP. I don't know why that is. I'm glad it's that way, but just FYI. All right, where was I looking here? What am I? Oh, Palmetto. That's right. I closed Classic Firearms. That's why I can't find it. Okay, of course they don't have one. What about the Protector carbine? And while we're doing that, I have it pull that up because I'm drawing a blank at the moment since I'm trying to talk and do this. There's the Protector carbine. From PSA, it's $2,100, which is basically what the MSRP is. But that is within that 2,000 range. And we'll talk a little bit here in just a second. I wanted to give a couple more options. See, I always get them confused. I want to say Bravo Company is another one. Yeah, I think Bravo Company. They also quality ARs. I always get them confused with another brand that is 3 letters, probably also starts with a B. And so if I am confusing them, I apologize, but I'm 99% sure this is what I'm thinking of. Also, excellent guns. And again, there's hundreds, there's as many as 500 different models and brands out there. So keep in mind, what I'm showing you are just some guaranteed good choices. There are many others, especially if you're willing to spend a little more. But as far as the model, the specific model is kind of up to you. Just make sure that it's M-LOK. This one right here is key mod. You can see how it's got this keyhole shape instead of the rectangle holes. So you just want to make sure it's an M-LOK rail between 12.5, 16 inches. It's 5.56 chambered or multi-cal chambered, same thing. And direct gas impingement. Again, you can go with the piston system if you want, but my argument is that, again, if you're going to have one, it should be direct gas impingement. It's a proven system. It's the simplest system, and having parts interchangeability matters, which is why a standard mil spec firearm matters too. You don't want something that is unique to that brand. The more interchangeable the parts, the better. Obviously, if you were buying, like if the militia existed, for example, the American militia existed, and they were issuing orders for what to buy for your specific rifle, it would probably be a rifle, a particular type, to ensure intercompatibility and all of that. But because that's not the case, just keep that in mind. It's not the most important thing, but it is a relevant factor. Trying to think of who else here. Let me check this list again. There are many out there. FN makes a quality. Smith, that's kind of, up to question. Same with Springfield. The Springfield Saint is a great rifle, actually. Now that I say that, that you could probably include in the list. Again, assuming that it is mil spec and meets the same standards. I would also say that a full auto bolt carrier group is relevant because there is a difference between a full auto bolt carrier group and not. And it's not that you need to shoot full auto, it's that is of higher reliability. The focus on that is higher reliability rather than higher accuracy. Accuracy is good enough. Again, at 12.5 inches, direct gas impingement on a 5.56, you should be able to hit 500 meters, no problem. That's all the average person needs to be able to do. The Saint is probably one of the cheaper options. Let's take a look here at a couple options. This one looks like it's got a long enough barrel. Let's see. Direct gas impingement. Nickel boron coated. Enhanced M16 bolt carrier. 5.56. This is an 11.5, so it's a little shy on the barrel length. Which, by the way, if you are going to go with a short barrel and you're unaware, just in general, speaking about AR-15s, you want one of these fork-style flash suppressors. It makes a huge difference on the concussion coming out of the front of the gun. If you don't have this, you will knock over, like let's say you're shooting at a large target board, for example, that is 15 feet away. The concussion out the front of just a standard barrel profile will knock it over. Anyway, that's beside the point. Ask me how I know. I wanted to see. So this is Victor. $1,500. So this one's in the 1,500 range. And this should be more than reliable enough too. So let's talk about why, and then we'll get out of here for tonight. Like I said, we'll talk about some of the other components that you should have tomorrow. Ammunition, how much, armor, things like that. But let's talk about why 5.56 instead of 9mm or PCC instead of 7.62 or 300 blackout. Again, if you want to own on top of it, that's great. But intercompatibility is important, especially with ammunition. So that's why 5.56. It is still the best choice for the civilian. Yes, the new 277 Fury, better round, but it is absolutely insanely expensive. Like $3-4 a round expensive. It is almost impossible to get your hands on right now, other than a box or two. And who knows how long it's going to be before it's available. So for now, 5.56 is still the best choice. It is accurate enough. The ballistics are really good, especially if you move up to a 65, 68, 77 grain bullet instead of a previous standard 55, but it is the widest available, it is the least expensive, and training matters. Training matters as much as everything else, if not more. And so you need to be able to buy 1,000 rounds at a time. You need to be able to buy a case of ammunition at a time. In that case, cost matters. And the fact is, 300 blackout, first of all, it's only good to 200 meters about instead of 500. And it's about twice as expensive as 5.56. If you can spend twice as much, that's great. Not everybody can. And so that's why I always come back for now to 5.56. the problem with this diversity of rounds that are available, personally, what I would choose is the new 224 Valkyrie or one of those similar rounds. There's several out there. And that's what I wish the military would have chosen, because the 277 Fury, the recoil is insane. The barrel pressures are incredibly high, so you're talking about lower barrel life. It is the only bullet known that is allegedly capable of puncturing modern armor, but there's other ways to get around that. And the fact is, the average person's not going to be able to control the recoil on these guns. We've seen videos, I've played them before, of trained and experienced soldiers trying to shoot the 277 Fury, even just on fast semi-auto, and walk forward, and it's literally throwing off their walk. It is so ridiculous. That's not good choice. The fact that you're going to be running through parts faster because the pressures are so high, it's super expensive. Yes, the military needed to find a new round. I think they made a terrible choice, and I think ultimately the 277's going to end up being reserved for special forces and things like that, and they're going to find something that is a little less powerful for the average soldier. I wouldn't say mark my words on it, but I think that's most likely where it's headed. For now, for the average civilian, 5.56 is still the best choice. Period. It's going to remain cheap and available for a long time because the AR-15 is the most popular firearm in civilian hands. It allows the intercompatibility. It's the best as far as parts longevity and low recoil and accuracy and all of these things. It's the best compromise all the way around, which that's what an assault rifle is, really, when you get down to it. They're not designed to kill the fastest, possible, or whatever nonsense anti-gunners say. They're a compromise. Assault rifles, by definition, are a compromise. They're a compromise on accuracy, on distance, on quote-unquote stopping power, which I know is a bad term, but all of these things in order to get the best middle ground possible. That's really what they are. Pistol caliber carbines, great for home defense, not great for beyond that. Not going to stop a wild animal, let alone somebody that's wearing body armor or things like that. And that's why I wouldn't go that route. That's why I wouldn't go with anything above 5.56. As far as direct gas impingement, it is by far the most common system. It's what most people already have. Yes, piston systems are a little bit more reliable, generally speaking. However, they're usually proprietary. There's no parts interchangeability between one gas piston system and another. There are a few that operate on the 416 gas system, but as far as I know, that's the only one that even has some compatibility with other rifles. And I'm not sure how many that it might be one other rifle for all I know. Regardless, it just makes the most sense because it gives you the most compatibility in parts. It gives you the most reasonable reliability and workability. It allows, if for whatever reason, you got to pick up somebody else's gun at the training range or whatever, you're completely familiar with that gun, even if it's a different brand. Everything is exactly the same. Your buddy breaks extractor pin or whatever, stuff like that happens. Yours will fit, that sort of thing. And so that's why I think the having a standardized set of basic, specifications is ideal. That's where I'm at on that. You guys can argue with me all you want. You can send me an email directly, jbu@usa.com. In the comments section on x.com/JBU_show, or of course in the comments section under the video. Tell me what you think. If you are, if you think I'm overlooking something that's important, I will certainly hear you out. But having put the thought that I have into it, I think that's what makes the most sense. Tomorrow we'll talk about what kind of pistol, because if you're going to own one type of gun, you need a pistol too. So I kind of lied. You need 2 guns, minimum. But we'll talk about pistols, we'll talk about calibers, we'll talk about body armor, magazines, and optics, flashlights, the bare minimum things that you should, every single American should have. Every single able-bodied male American should have, at minimum, these things, starting with a direct gas impingement 5.56 AR-15. And it should be one of a handful of mil-spec rifles. That's my opinion. All right. Don't forget to check out my co-host, Allan, at FirstAllan21X, the American Sincerest, and Austin with the Miller Talk podcast, millertalk.substack.com, or millertalk_pod on X, and of course, the Jumbo Burrito Union Show, JBU_show on X. Yeah. Again, you can send an email directly, jbu@usa.com. And audio podcast is available on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and anchor.fm/JBU has all the links, has all the audio podcast archive. And shout out to Rumble and X for letting us do this unedited and uncensored and all that BS. In fact, I'm expecting a strike tonight from YouTube because I was talking about guns and I showed some pictures on the screen. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you being here. I suppose I should probably have the outro ready if I'm going to be doing that. And we'll be back on tomorrow night. With that, my name is Chris, and this has been the JBU Show. Now I can eat one.
Bye. Wait, I can want to be a little bit louder.
Yeah.
This is only between us.
This is just between us.
This is just between us.
Perfect.